There are places where darkness is not just present, it breathes, it watches, it waits. Deep in the Vinnytsia region in the old village of Chernyavka, something lurks, something so terrifying that even the most skeptical refuse to speak of it. Petro, a young man returning to his ancestral home after years in the city, finds himself the sole heir to his grandmother's estate. But from his first night back he realizes he is not alone. Something moves beneath the floorboards. Something whispers through the windows at night. Something wants him to remember. Why do the villagers fear the old house on the outskirts? What terrible secret is buried beneath the soil of Chernyavka? Petro stood before the old house. The roof sagged in places, the shutters trembled in the wind, and the path leading to the porch was overgrown with weeds. The last time he had been here, he was just a boy, visiting his grandmother during the summer. Now he had returned to deal with the inheritance. The village greeted him with silence. Only a few elderly women by the well watched him, whispering amongst themselves. "Old woman, he stayed, the fool." Petro pretended not to hear. Inside, the house smelled of dust and decay. Everything was as he remembered. The wooden walls, the old stove, the faded portraits of long-dead relatives. But something felt off. That night he heard whispers. At first he thought it was the wind, but as he lay in bed, the sounds became clearer. Someone was walking beneath the floor. Petro sat up in bed, his heart pounding. The whispers came from below, muffled voices speaking in tones too soft to understand. He reached for his phone, turned on the flashlight, and shone it at the floor. Nothing. Then, a knock. A slow, deliberate knock from beneath the wooden planks. He jumped up, grabbing a heavy wrench from his backpack. With his breath held, he stepped cautiously across the room, pressing his ear to the floor. Silence. Then suddenly, a scratch. Something clawed at the wood. Petro yanked back, his skin crawling. The floor vibrated slightly, like something was pushing against it from below. Voice, "Vo, don't dig." At dawn, Petro left the house exhausted and shaken. He needed answers. He approached an elderly man sitting on a bench near the store. "Petro, did my grandmother ever say anything about strange things in the house?" "Old man, you shouldn't be there." Petro, "Why, old man?" "Because something else is." "Petro, come on. What, a ghost story, old man?" "That house was built over an old grave, a cursed one. Your great-grandfather was warned never to disturb the ground beneath it. But one night he heard noises, and he dug." Petro's stomach turned. "Petro and, old man, they never found his body." That night Petro couldn't sleep. He kept thinking about the noises, the old man's warning. Finally he decided he had to check the basement. The wooden stairs creaked beneath his weight. The air was damp, filled with the scent of mold and old wood. His flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing crates, rusted tools, and a trapdoor. It was ancient, the wood blackened with age, iron hinges rusted. He knelt beside it, hesitating. He ignored the whisper in his mind and pulled the hatch open. A black hole stared back at him. The tunnel below was carved from packed earth, leading into the unknown. And from deep within it, something breathed. Petro lowered himself into the tunnel, his breath shallow. His phone flashlight barely penetrated the darkness. The air was thick, heavy, wrong. The deeper he went, the colder it became. Then he saw them, footprints. They led further into the passage, imprinted in the damp soil. Fresh. Someone had been here. Then, a whisper, but this time it was not in his head. It came from the darkness ahead. Petro stood frozen, staring at the small wooden box in his hands. The tunnel's damp air pressed against his skin, and the footprints leading deeper into the darkness seemed almost fresh. With trembling fingers, he lifted the lid. Inside lay a handful of human teeth, yellowed, cracked, some with dried blood still clinging to the roots. Petro nearly dropped the box. His breath hitched as he swept the flashlight beam around. Nothing. The whisper had come from inside his own head, or had it. From deeper within the tunnel something shifted. A slow, deliberate movement. Something was down there, watching. He slammed the box shut and turned back toward the ladder. But as he placed his foot on the bottom rung, he heard a soft, wet breathing behind him. Something was right there, and then fingers brushed the back of his neck. Petro scrambled up the ladder, shoving the hatch closed behind him. His hands shook as he threw his weight against it, his breath ragged. The air in the basement felt heavier, almost thicker, like the house itself was breathing with him. When he looked up, his stomach dropped. The doorway to the basement was gone. The walls had shifted. The stairs that led up to his kitchen were now solid wood, as if they had never been there. His flashlight flickered. A shape stirred in the shadows. Not a person, not an animal. Something twisted, hunched, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. It took a step forward, its head lolling to one side. You brought it back. Petro bolted to the far wall, his heart hammering, his fingers scraped against wood, searching for anything, a way out, a weapon. Behind him, the thing took another step. Its joints cracked, its breath rattled. Then, a hand burst from the floorboards. Rotten, skeletal fingers locked around his ankle. Petro screamed as the grip tightened, pulling him downward. The wood beneath him split open, revealing a gaping hole of black soil and more hands. "Stay! Join us! You opened it!" Petro kicked, breaking free just as another set of fingers clawed at his wrist. With all his strength, he lunged at the wall, and suddenly the doorway to the kitchen was back. But standing in the entrance was his grandmother, and her eyes were missing. Petro stumbled back, gasping. His grandmother's hollow gaze was locked onto him, her face wrong, stretched, the skin too tight. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Then she took a step forward. The walls groaned, the floor buckled beneath his feet. "You should have left." The room collapsed inward. Petro fell, not onto the kitchen floor but into darkness. And the last thing he saw before losing consciousness was the thing from the tunnel, crawling toward him. When Petro awoke, he was in his bedroom, but the bed was wrong. The walls were wrong. They breathed. Something lay on his chest. A letter. It was written in his grandmother's shaky handwriting. "Grandmother, V.O. If you are reading this, it means you opened the tunnel. It is too late now, but you might still have a chance. Bury the box. Bury it where no one will find it. And whatever you do, do not speak its name." Petro's fingers tightened around the paper. "Petro, what name?" Voice. "Vo. You already know." The whisper did not stop. It slithered into his ears, curling around his thoughts, becoming his thoughts. Petro stumbled to the old mirror on the wall. His reflection was not his own. It was his great-grandfather, but his mouth was sewn shut. Reflection, run. Petro ran. Out of the house, down the dirt path toward the only road that led out of the village. But the road looped. No matter which way he turned, he always ended up back at the house. The villagers stood outside now, watching him. Silent, expressionless. Old man. "It won't let you go." Behind him the house creaked, and something stepped out of the doorway. It wore his face. Petro had no choice. He had to finish this. He grabbed a shovel and began digging behind the house where the ground was soft. The whispers screamed in his head. Then, the shovel hit something solid, a coffin, and inside, his great-grandfather's skeleton. But the skull turned toward him, too late. The ground split open. The air turned black. The house sank into the soil, dragged down by unseen hands. The sky twisted. The villagers vanished. Petro fell to his knees as the thing wearing his face reached for him. Thing. It was never about the house. It was always about you. Petro woke up somewhere else, a dark version of Chernyavka, a silent, rotting place where shadows moved on their own. The thing was still with him, but now it wore his skin, and it smiled. Thing, your turn. Petro had one chance. He grabbed the box of teeth and whispered the name. The thing screamed. The world shattered, but it wasn't enough. Petro opened his eyes. He was back in the house. The door knocked. "Young man, hello. I inherited this house from my grandmother." And Petro smiled. He was the whisper now, waiting for the next one.